Welcome to the world of ideas and philosophy, where John Stuart Mill, the influential 19th-century British philosopher, economist, and social reformer, shines bright like a beacon of wisdom. With his groundbreaking thoughts on liberty, utilitarianism, and individual freedom, Mill's intellectual legacy continues to inspire and enlighten minds across the globe. Join us as we delve into the profound insights and revolutionary ideas of this remarkable thinker.
John Stuart Mill was born on May 20, 1806, in London, England, into an extraordinary intellectual environment. His father, James Mill, was a prominent philosopher and historian, and a close associate of the utilitarian philosopher Jeremy Bentham. Determined to mold his son into a great thinker, James Mill embarked on an ambitious educational experiment that would make young John Stuart one of the most precocious minds of his time. Mill's childhood was far from ordinary. He began learning Greek at the age of 3, and by the time he was 8, he had already read works by Herodotus, Xenophon, and Plato. His father's rigorous curriculum continued with Latin, logic, and political economy, and by the age of 12, Mill was reading complex philosophical texts that would challenge even the most mature minds. He described this period as both a gift and a burden, saying later in life, "I was never a boy, and never played at anything." This intense upbringing left Mill isolated from other children and under immense pressure. At the age of 20, he suffered a severe mental crisis, questioning the purpose of his life and the value of the rigorous education he had received. He later wrote about this period in his autobiography, stating, "I seem to have nothing left to live for." However, it was during this dark time that Mill discovered the poetry of William Wordsworth and the works of the Romantic poets. Their emphasis on emotion, beauty, and the human experience helped him find a new balance between reason and feeling, profoundly influencing his later philosophical work. Emerging from his crisis with a renewed sense of purpose, Mill set out to reform and expand the utilitarian philosophy he had inherited from Bentham and his father. He believed that Bentham's strict utilitarianism, which defined the greatest happiness merely as the sum of individual pleasures, was too narrow. In his most famous work, Utilitarianism, Mill argued for a more nuanced version of the principle, emphasizing that some pleasures are qualitatively higher than others. He famously stated, "It is better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied, better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied." For Mill, the cultivation of the mind and the development of one's moral and intellectual faculties were central to true happiness. Mill's contributions were not limited to ethics. He was a passionate advocate for individual liberty and freedom of expression. In his seminal essay on liberty, he argued for the importance of protecting individual rights against the tyranny of the majority. He introduced the harm principle, which states, "The only freedom which deserves the name is that of pursuing our own good in our own way, so long as we do not attempt to deprive others of theirs, or impede their efforts to obtain it." Mill believed that individuals should be free to act as they wish, provided they do not harm others. This idea has become a foundational principle of modern liberal thought and has influenced debates on free speech, personal autonomy, and government intervention. Mill was also a trailblazer in advocating for gender equality. In his book The Subjection of Women, he made a powerful case for the equality of the sexes, arguing that the subordination of women was not only unjust but also a significant barrier to human progress. He wrote, "The legal subordination of one sex to the other is wrong in itself, and now one of the chief hindrances to human improvement." Mill's advocacy for women's rights was revolutionary for his time and laid the groundwork for future feminist movements. In addition to his philosophical writings, Mill was active in public life. He served as a member of Parliament from 1865 to 1868, where he championed issues such as labor rights, public education, and electoral reform. He was one of the first British MPs to advocate for women's suffrage, presenting a petition for women's voting rights to Parliament. Mill's life was marked by intellectual rigor and a deep commitment to social reform, but it was also shaped by profound personal relationships. His deep love for Harriet Taylor, whom he married after a two-decade-long friendship, profoundly influenced his thinking. Harriet was a brilliant and independent thinker in her own right, and their relationship was one of intellectual partnership and mutual respect. Mill credited her with many of his insights on liberty and equality. Towards the end of his life, Mill retreated to the south of France, where he continued to write and reflect. He died on May 8, 1873, in Avignon, leaving behind a legacy that continues to resonate in discussions on ethics, politics, and human rights. John Stuart Mill's story is one of a relentless search for truth and justice, tempered by a deep empathy for the human condition. He dared to challenge the conventions of his time and envisioned a world where individuals could pursue their own happiness while contributing to the greater good of society. His life and works remind us that the pursuit of knowledge and the fight for justice are not only compatible but essential to the progress of humanity.